Courage over comfort is a choice we face every single day. It is the decision to lean into growth instead of retreating into safety. It is the willingness to embrace discomfort, knowing that on the other side of discomfort is where real transformation happens. Every morning, before we even step out of bed, we are already at a crossroads. Do we choose the path that feels safe, familiar, and easy, or do we take the road that challenges us, pushes us, and ultimately makes us stronger? Choosing courage means choosing to show up even when we don't feel ready. It means acknowledging that fear is present but deciding that fear does not get to be in control. It's about understanding that stepping into something new, something uncertain, will never feel completely comfortable. There will always be a part of us that wants to stay small, that wants to cling to the security of what we already know. But growth does not happen in the familiar. Strength is not built in ease. The version of ourselves that we dream of becoming, the one who is confident, successful, and fulfilled, is only created through the choices we make when we are scared, uncertain, and vulnerable. The truth is, comfort can be a trap. It feels good in the moment, but it keeps us stuck. It tells us that we should wait until we are more prepared, more skilled, more certain before we take action. But life does not wait for us to feel ready. The most successful, fulfilled, and joyful people are not the ones who avoided fear, but the ones who acted in spite of it. They are the ones who understood that discomfort is not a sign to stop, but a sign that they are on the right path. Every morning, we have to remind ourselves that courage is not about being fearless. It is about being willing to move forward with fear still present. It is about waking up and deciding that today, we will take the risk, we will speak up, we will pursue the things that matter to us even if they scare us. Courage is about recognizing that failure is not the enemy, staying stagnant is. If we avoid every situation that challenges us, we also avoid every opportunity to grow. If we refuse to take risks, we deny ourselves the possibility of something better. Comfort tells us to stay where we are, even if where we are is not where we want to be. It tells us that at least we are safe, at least we are not risking rejection, embarrassment, or failure. But courage tells us that those things, rejection, embarrassment, failure, are not the worst things that can happen. The worst thing is looking back one day and realizing that we never really lived because we were too afraid to try. Choosing courage means making peace with imperfection. It means being willing to be seen as a beginner, to not have all the answers, to fail and get back up again. It means understanding that the people who do great things in life are not the ones who were the smartest, the most talented, or the most prepared. They were the ones who dared to step forward despite uncertainty. They were the ones who were willing to be bad at something long enough to become good at it. They were the ones who saw obstacles not as stop signs but as proof that they were moving towards something meaningful. Every morning, we have to remind ourselves that courage is a practice. It is not something we either have or don't have. It is something we build, one small act of bravery at a time. Maybe today, courage looks like speaking up in a meeting when we would usually stay quiet. Maybe it looks like setting a boundary that feels uncomfortable but necessary. Maybe it looks like taking the first step toward a goal that feels overwhelming. Courage is not always loud. It is not always dramatic. Sometimes it is as simple as getting out of bed and choosing to believe in ourselves a little more than we did yesterday. It is the commitment to keep going, to keep trying, to keep showing up even when it would be easier to give up. The power of self-compassion is one of the most transformative forces in our lives. It shapes the way we see ourselves, how we handle challenges, and ultimately, how we move through the world. Yet, for so many of us, self-compassion feels like an afterthought, something we extend to others but rarely to ourselves. We have been conditioned to believe that being hard on ourselves will push us to do better, that self-criticism is the key to success, and that if we let up, even for a moment, we will become lazy, unmotivated, or unworthy. But the truth is, self-compassion is not weakness. It is not self-indulgence or an excuse to avoid responsibility. It is, in fact, one of the greatest sources of strength, resilience, and personal growth. Every morning, as we wake up and prepare to face the day, the way we speak to ourselves matters. The inner dialogue that plays in our minds sets the tone for everything that follows. If we wake up and immediately flood our thoughts with self-doubt, criticism, and judgment, we begin our day already carrying the weight of negativity. We remind ourselves of everything we think we did wrong, everything we have not yet accomplished, every way we believe we fall short. And then we wonder why we feel exhausted before the day has even begun. But what if, instead, we started our day with kindness? What if we spoke to ourselves with the same warmth and understanding that we would offer a friend? What if we allowed ourselves to be human, to be imperfect, to be in progress rather than demanding perfection from ourselves every single moment? Self-compassion is the practice of treating ourselves with the same kindness and care that we so readily give to others. It is about recognizing that we are not alone in our struggles, that imperfection is part of being human, and that we are worthy of love and acceptance exactly as we are. It does not mean ignoring our flaws or refusing to take responsibility for our mistakes. Rather, it means holding space for ourselves, acknowledging our pain, and responding with gentleness rather than harshness. It means understanding that failure is not a reflection of our worth but a necessary step in learning and growing. One of the greatest misconceptions about self-compassion is that it leads to complacency, that if we go too easy on ourselves, we will stop striving to be better. But research shows the opposite. When we practice self-compassion, we become more resilient, more motivated, and more willing to take risks because we are not paralyzed by fear of failure. When we know that we will treat ourselves with kindness no matter what happens, we give ourselves permission to try. We allow ourselves to dream bigger, take bolder steps, and recover more quickly when things do not go as planned. Self-compassion also changes the way we experience setbacks. When we are overly critical of ourselves, failure feels final. It feels like proof that we are not good enough, that we should not have tried, that we are fundamentally flawed. But when we approach ourselves with compassion, failure becomes just another part of the process. It is a lesson, not a condemnation. It is an opportunity to learn, adjust, and keep moving forward. Instead of spiraling into shame and self-doubt, we can acknowledge what went wrong, recognize that mistakes are part of growth, and take the next step with renewed confidence. The way we treat ourselves in moments of struggle also impacts our relationships with others. When we are compassionate with ourselves, we become more compassionate with those around us. We no longer see the world through a lens of harsh judgment because we have learned to extend grace to ourselves first. We become more patient, more understanding, and more open to connection. We no longer demand perfection from others because we have learned to stop demanding it from ourselves. The practice of self-compassion is not always easy, especially if we have spent years being our own. Vulnerability is one of the most misunderstood qualities of human existence. For so long, we have been taught that strength means having it all together, never showing weakness, and keeping our emotions in check. We have been conditioned to believe that being vulnerable is a flaw, a sign of fragility, something to be hidden away. But the truth is, vulnerability is not weakness, it is one of the greatest sources of strength, courage, and connection. It takes far more bravery to be open and honest about who we are than it does to put up walls and pretend we are invincible. Every single day, we face opportunities to be vulnerable, whether we realize it or not. It happens in the moments when we express how we truly feel, when we take a risk without knowing the outcome, when we allow ourselves to be seen in our most authentic form. Vulnerability is present when we admit that we do not have all the answers, when we ask for help, when we share our fears, and when we allow others to witness our struggles. It is there when we tell someone we love them without knowing if they feel the same way, when we put our work, our art, or our ideas into the world knowing they may be criticized, and when we stand up for what we believe in, even if it means standing alone. Vulnerability is woven into every meaningful aspect of life, and yet so many of us spend our lives avoiding it. We avoid vulnerability because it feels risky. It exposes us to the possibility of rejection, failure, and judgment. It makes us feel like we are handing someone else the power to hurt us. But what we often fail to realize is that by avoiding vulnerability, we are also closing ourselves off to the things that make life truly fulfilling: deep relationships, personal growth, and genuine joy. When we build walls to protect ourselves from pain, we also block ourselves from love, connection, and belonging. The very things we fear: being seen, being judged, being imperfect, are also the things that make us human, and the more we embrace them, the more free we become. Vulnerability is not about oversharing or exposing every part of our lives to the world. It is about allowing ourselves to be real. It is about having the courage to show up as we truly are instead of hiding behind a version of ourselves that feels safer. It is about recognizing that we do not have to pretend to be perfect in order to be worthy of love and respect. Strength is not found in the ability to hide our emotions or push through pain without acknowledgement. True strength is found in the ability to say, "This is who I am. These are my struggles. And I am still worthy." One of the most powerful aspects of vulnerability is its ability to create connection. When we see someone else being vulnerable when they share their struggles, their fears, or their doubts, it makes us feel less alone. It reminds us that we are not the only ones who experience pain, uncertainty, or self-doubt. It allows us to relate to one another on a deeper level, beyond the surface of appearances and accomplishments. The people we admire the most, the ones who inspire us, are not the ones who pretend to be perfect. They are the ones who are willing to share their journey honestly, to speak about their failures and lessons, and to remind us that imperfection is not something to be ashamed of. Vulnerability is also the foundation of personal growth. If we are not willing to take risks, to try new things, or to put ourselves in situations where we might fail, we will never reach our full potential. Every great achievement, every act of creativity, and every moment of courage requires vulnerability. It requires stepping into the unknown without a guarantee of success. It requires embracing the discomfort of uncertainty and moving forward anyway. Growth does not happen in comfort zones. It happens in the moments when we allow ourselves to be seen, when we push past the fear of failure, and when we choose to show up. Authenticity leads to fulfillment because it allows us to live in alignment with who we truly are rather than who we think we are supposed to be. So many of us spend our lives trying to meet expectations, whether they come from society, family, or even ourselves. We are taught from a young age how to behave, what success looks like, and which paths are acceptable to follow. Over time, we begin to mold ourselves to fit these expectations, sometimes without even realizing it. We silence parts of ourselves that do not seem to fit, we adopt beliefs that are not truly ours, and we make choices based on what will earn approval rather than what will bring us joy. In doing so, we slowly drift away from our authentic selves, and without authenticity, true fulfillment remains out of reach. To be authentic means to be honest with ourselves about who we are, what we believe, and what we want. It means listening to our inner voice rather than external noise. It means showing up in the world as our real selves, without pretense or fear of judgment. But authenticity is not always easy. It requires vulnerability. It requires us to acknowledge our fears, our imperfections, and our deepest desires. It asks us to let go of the masks we wear for approval and to trust that we are enough just as we are. Many of us hesitate to embrace authenticity because we fear rejection. We worry that if people see the real us, they may not accept us. But the irony is that when we hide who we truly are, we still risk rejection. We just end up being rejected for someone we are pretending to be rather than someone we genuinely are. The people who experience true fulfillment are not necessarily those who achieve the most, gain the most recognition, or follow the safest path. They are the ones who dare to live in alignment with their values and passions, even when it is difficult. They are the ones who wake up each morning knowing that they are being true to themselves rather than living for someone else's approval. Fulfillment does not come from perfection or from meeting arbitrary standards. It comes from knowing that we are living in a way that honors who we really are. One of the greatest benefits of authenticity is the freedom it brings. When we are constantly trying to fit in, we expend enormous energy monitoring how we speak, how we act, and how we present ourselves. We become consumed by questions like, what will people think, and am I doing this the right way? But when we embrace authenticity, we let go of that burden. We no longer live in fear of being found out because we are not pretending to be anything other than ourselves. We are free to express our thoughts, make choices that align with our hearts, and surround ourselves with people who accept us for who we truly are. Authenticity also strengthens our relationships. When we are not being real, the connections we form with others are not fully real either. We may be liked, but deep down, we know that we are being liked for a version of ourselves that is carefully curated and controlled. True connection can only happen when we allow ourselves to be seen, imperfections and all. When we are authentic, we attract people who appreciate us for who we genuinely are, and those relationships bring far more joy and meaning than relationships built on pretense. Living authentically does not mean that we will never experience fear, doubt, or failure. It does not mean that life will suddenly become easy. But it does mean that no matter what challenges arise, we will face them as our true selves, rather than a version of ourselves that was created to please others. It means that we can stand in our truth even when it is uncomfortable. It means that we trust ourselves enough to follow paths that may not always make sense to others but feel right for us. There will always be external pressures trying to pull us away from our authenticity. Society tells